I didn't plan to talk about this. Honestly, I told myself I never would. But one night, somewhere between reheating leftover ramen and accidentally stepping on my own sock, don't ask, something hit me so hard I couldn't ignore it anymore. My father's voice. That calm, serious tone only dads have when they say something that sounds simple but ends up haunting you for years. Find a wife like your mother. At the time, I laughed. I thought it was one of those typical Korean dad phrases, half joke, half warning. But now, I get it. And what I realized after understanding why he said it made me run to my mom, hug her like a kid, and almost cry into her apron. She pretended to be annoyed, but I saw her smile hiding behind the rice spoon. Before I get into that story, let me ask you something. Have you ever had advice that sounded so boring you ignored it for 10 years, only to realize later it was basically the secret of the universe? Yeah, that's what this is. My dad said it casually while he was fixing the remote control one day. Which, by the way, he broke himself 2 hours earlier. Typical. He didn't even look at me when he said it. Just, Jungkook, find a wife like your mother. Click, click. Remote still dead. I nodded, half listening, probably thinking about chicken. But that one sentence never left my head. Years later, it came back to me at the weirdest times on stage before a concert, in the back of a car at 3 a.m. Even once when Jimin stole my fries and said, "Bro, love is about sharing." No, it's about balance, Jimin. You ate all of them. But I kept wondering, what did my father mean exactly? Because my mom is, well, she's like a combination of an angel and a strict manager. She has that smile that can melt steel, but also the kind of look that can stop a running dog midair. Growing up, she didn't yell much. She didn't have to. One eyebrow raise, and I'd confess to things I hadn't even done yet. I started thinking maybe my dad didn't just mean find someone kind like your mom. Maybe he meant something deeper. Maybe it was about stability, patience, or that quiet power moms have when the rest of the world is falling apart. The kind of strength that doesn't need applause. You know the kind. If you have someone like that in your life, send them a message right now, or at least wash the dishes without being asked. Small gestures count. Anyway, let me tell you what made me finally understand. It wasn't during some dramatic family dinner or an emotional movie, it was during laundry. Yes, laundry, the most uncinematic moment in human history. I was home for a few days folding shirts when my mom walked in and started refolding everything I had just folded. Typical. I said, "Mom, I already did that." She said, "I know, that's why I'm fixing it." Then she smiled. You're like your father. He thinks folding is just about making it look nice, but real folding is about how it fits in the drawer. I laughed, but then I stopped. Because that's marriage. That's life. It's not about looking perfect from the outside. It's about how two people fit when the drawer closes when no one's watching. I know, it sounds poetic for someone who once burned water while cooking ramen, but stay with me. That moment hit me like a lyric that finally finds its melody. I thought about how my dad used to tease my mom, but always made her laugh first. How she used to scold him, but still packed his lunch every single morning for 30 years. Their rhythm wasn't perfect, but it was real. And I realized that's what he wanted for me. Not a perfect woman, but a rhythm that fits my heart even when life goes offbeat. Now, before you start picturing this as a dramatic K-drama where violins start playing, let me tell you, my parents are hilarious. Once, they argued about who ate the last piece of tofu, and it turned into a 5-day Cold War. My mom would write tofu in capital letters on the grocery list and glare at my dad while passing the pen. My dad would then sneak an extra pack into the cart like it was a peace treaty. I grew up watching that mix of chaos and affection. Maybe that's why I never believed love was supposed to be quiet. It's supposed to sound like life a little messy, a little noisy, but always warm. But understanding that lesson wasn't instant. It took me years, and honestly, it took the guys. RM once said something during practice that stuck with me. We all want someone who understands our rhythm, but first, we have to learn our own beat. At the time, I thought he was talking about dance timing. I nodded, pretended to get it, and went back to practicing. But later, I realized he was basically describing my parents. My mom knows exactly when to step forward, my dad knows when to step back, They move like choreography only they can hear. Taehyung said it best once during dinner. Bro, your mom is the CEO of patience. And he wasn't wrong. That woman waited 40 minutes outside my middle school concert because I forgot my drumsticks at home. She didn't even get mad. She just looked at me and said, "Next time, make the music worth my time." That one sentence hit harder than any scolding. I think that's what real love looks like. It challenges you, but it never crushes you. And then there's Jimin. If my mom is the CEO of Patience, Jimin is the intern who spilled coffee on her desk but somehow got promoted. He's always the one who reminds me to call your mom, dude. He says it every week, sometimes every day. Once he even FaceTimed her himself because he said I wasn't answering. When I told my mom, she said, "Jimin is such a good son." I said, "He's not your son." She said, "He's more obedient than you." I had no comeback. She was right. The funny thing is, even when I thought I understood everything about family, life found ways to surprise me. There was one time during a world tour when I felt completely drained. Physically fine, but emotionally, I was running on fumes. You know those nights when you finish performing, the lights go off, and suddenly it's just you and silence? That's when my dad texted me, "Did you eat?" That's it. 3 words. But it felt like he was saying, "Don't lose yourself out there." And after that show, I video called him and asked again, "Dad, why did you tell me to find someone like mom?" He laughed, "Because she still makes me eat when I forget." That's love, simple, persistent, unglamorous, but exactly what keeps you alive. When I shared that story with Jin, he said, "That's why I'm still single. No one makes me soup when I'm tired." I told him, "You're rich, buy soup." But I get what he meant. We all want that comfort, the kind that doesn't announce itself. The kind that sneaks in through small acts. My mom never once said, "I'm proud of you" directly. Instead, she'd ask if I had clean socks before an event. That's mom language for, "I love you, but don't get cocky." Oh, I think that's what my dad was trying to teach me, to look for love that speaks in actions, not captions. The kind that folds your laundry twice and still thinks you can do better. The kind that nags because they care, not because they want control. The kind that still chooses you, even when you forget to put the cap on the toothpaste for the 100th time. Sorry, Mom. When I finally hugged her that day, she was confused. "Why are you hugging me? Did something happen?" I said, "No, I just realized Dad was right." She laughed. Of course he was. He married me. Classic mom comeback. But I think she knew what I meant. She patted my back and said, "Good. Now go find someone patient enough to handle your laundry skills." Touché. Sometimes I wonder how my life would look if I'd never learned that lesson. If I kept chasing perfection instead of connection. If I kept looking for excitement instead of steadiness. Fame gives you a lot of attention, but it doesn't give you warmth. That comes from people who knew you before you knew yourself. The ones who remember your favorite soup flavor, your allergy to certain detergents, and the way you hum when you're nervous. And that's why I wanted to share this today. Because maybe someone watching this feels like love is too complicated, too far away, or too late. But it's not. Love isn't hiding in grand gestures. It's probably right there, sitting on the couch, refolding your laundry and pretending not to care. Or it's in your friend group, disguised as the guy who reminds you to call home. Or maybe it's in yourself, waiting for you to stop chasing noise and start listening to rhythm. You see, my dad didn't just give me advice. He gave me a map, and I finally learned how to read it. I realized he wasn't just describing my mom. He was describing the kind of person who makes the world softer for everyone around them. Someone who turns chaos into calm, arguments into laughter, and burnt rice into comedy. And that, my friend, is the kind of love that lasts longer than trends or headlines. So, if you're listening right now, drop the city you're watching from in the comments. I want to know where all the patient people are hiding. And if this story made you smile even a little, call your mom. Or at least text her a heart emoji. Trust me, she'll send back a sticker that says, "Eat well." And maybe, just maybe, that's her way of saying, "I love you and don't forget your socks." Stay with me, because this story isn't over yet. I'm going to tell you what happened next. Something my mom said after that hug that completely changed how I see relationships, love, and even my own music. It's something I never told anyone before, not even the guys. But before that, I want you to remember one thing. Sometimes the simplest advice carries the loudest truth. My dad said, find a wife like your mother. What he really meant was, find someone who makes you want to be better and laugh while doing it. After that hug, my mom said something that felt like a lightning bolt wrapped in soft words. Jungkook, love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about choosing someone even when they're impossible. Then she looked straight at me and said, "You're impossible sometimes." I laughed, but deep down, I knew she wasn't joking. I think that's what all moms do. They deliver life lessons in the middle of insults, so it sticks longer. That sentence didn't leave my mind. Even later that night, when I was lying in bed, scrolling through memes Taehyung sent me, most of them were cats wearing sunglasses, I kept hearing it. Choosing someone even when they're impossible. I thought about my members, my friends, the people I've worked with. Every meaningful relationship I've had was built on that truth. We didn't stay together because it was easy. We stayed because we chose to laugh through the chaos. You see, in this industry, everything changes fast. Fame, schedules, moods, even hair color. One day, you're everyone's favorite. The next day, someone calls you overrated because you blinked wrong in an interview. But the people who stay by your side through all that, that's your real family. They're the ones who still check if you've eaten after a 14-hour day, even when you've already answered yes 3 times, just to make them stop asking. That's what my mom does. That's what my members do. It's the same energy love disguised as annoyance. Sometimes it's a text from Namjoon saying, "Don't forget the lyrics to the second verse," even though he knows I memorized it 3 days ago. Or J-Hope sending me motivational videos at 2 a.m. with a caption, "This one made me cry. Bro, maybe it'll make you cry too." It's funny, but it's also proof that care doesn't always look gentle. Sometimes it's disguised as constant reminders, unsolicited advice, or someone roasting your dance moves because they don't want to see you give up. One time during rehearsal, I was frustrated because I couldn't nail a move. Taehyung looked at me and said, "You know, if you keep frowning like that, you'll get wrinkles before your wedding." I said, "That's not helping." He said, "It's not advice, it's prevention." Everyone laughed. But later, when the lights were off, I thought he's right in his own weird way. Love is prevention. It's people stopping you from destroying yourself in small ways. It's someone reminding you to rest, to eat, to smile. And maybe that's why my dad always admired my mom. Because she never tried to change him, she just prevented him from getting worse. Like the time she stopped him from building a barbecue grill in the living room just to test it. Or when she caught him trying to fix a light switch with a butter knife. My mom's love language is saving lives quietly. That made me realize something else. I used to think love was fireworks, loud, exciting, dramatic. But watching my parents, I learned it's more like Wi-Fi. You don't see it, but when it's gone, nothing works. That's why when my dad said, "Find a wife like your mother," it wasn't about looks, cooking skills, or anything superficial. It was about finding someone whose presence keeps your life connected, even when the signal is weak. The funny thing is, I told Jimin about that realization. We were at the studio eating late night snacks, and I said, "You know what, Jimin? I think love is like Wi-Fi." He almost choked on his fish cake. "What do you mean Wi-Fi? So you want unlimited data, or what?" I said, "No, I mean it's invisible but powerful." He nodded slowly, pretending to understand, then said, "But still, if it disconnects, you panic." And he was right again. Jimin always has this talent for taking my emotional wisdom and turning it into meme material. But behind the jokes, there's truth. The people who stay connected to you even when life glitches, that's love. That's family. You know what's ironic? When I was younger, I thought I'd never need anyone. I wanted to be independent, prove that I could handle everything. But growing up taught me something my mom knew all along. Strength isn't about doing everything alone. It's about knowing who to lean on when you're tired. My mom leans on my dad. My dad leans on her. And now I lean on my brothers in BTS. Like the time we were in the US, filming content all day. Everyone was tired, hungry, half asleep. Suddenly, Yoongijungkook ordered pizza for everyone, without asking. When it arrived, he said, "Don't thank me, thank your exhaustion." That's how he shows care. He pretends not to, but his heart is too obvious. That's love in disguise. Or when J-Hope dragged me to the gym at 7 a.m. saying, "Bro, you'll thank me later." I didn't. Not then. I thanked him after the comeback when my stamina didn't betray me on stage. Love looks like that, annoying in the moment, but golden in hindsight. I think about how my mom must have felt doing the same thing for decades, reminding, repeating, forgiving, guiding, and she never asked for applause. That's why when my dad said those words, he wasn't telling me to copy her. He was warning me to respect that kind of love when I find it, because it's rare. The world is full of sparks, but few flames last through the rain. Sometimes I wonder how my mom and dad kept that flame alive. They've been together through times when they had no money, when my dad worked late, when I was too young to understand their sacrifices. Once, I asked my mom how they managed to stay happy through all that. She said, "We didn't stay happy, we stayed committed." That line hit me like a lyric I wish I'd written. Happiness comes and goes, but commitment, that's the rhythm you build your life on. I told RM that line once, and he smiled like he already knew it. "That's why our team works too," he said. "We don't stay happy every day, but we stay committed." And I realized my mom had taught me something I'd been practicing all along without even noticing. BTS works not because we're perfect, but because we keep showing up, even when it's hard, even when we annoy each other. That's love, too. And the humor part? My dad always says laughter is the cheapest repair tool for marriage. He says, if you can make her laugh, you can survive anything. I think he's right. I've seen my parents argue over the smallest things, remote control, seasoning, toothpaste direction, but by the end, one of them always cracks a joke, and suddenly it's over. That's their secret weapon. Sometimes I try that with my members. When tension builds, I make a weird noise or a face. Suddenly, everyone's laughing again, even if they don't want to. Maybe that's what my dad meant when he said, find someone like my mom. Find someone who won't let silence win. And you know what's funny? My mom once said she almost didn't marry my dad because he showed up late to their first date. When I asked why she forgave him, she said, because he looked so lost, holding flowers that didn't match. She said she laughed and thought, if I don't help this man, he'll die of confusion. That's how it started. Love, born out of pity and humor. When I think about it, that's the kind of love I want someday. Not the perfect Instagram filter kind, the kind where we accidentally burn dinner, laugh about it, and order takeout. The kind where we talk about dreams one minute and argue about who left the wet towel on the bed the next. The kind that feels alive, not flawless. Sometimes when we're backstage before a concert, I look at my members and think we're basically a chaotic family. RM's the dad giving lectures, Jin's the mom feeding everyone, Suga's the uncle who says he doesn't care but secretly does. J-Hope's the optimistic neighbor who brings snacks, Jimin's the emotional sibling who hugs too much, Taehyung's the unpredictable cousin who shows up with a pet he can't keep, and me, I'm the kid trying to keep everyone together. And somehow, it works. Maybe that's what family is, an organized mess that makes sense only to the people inside it. I once heard someone say that the secret to happiness is remembering who laughed with you when life stopped being funny. I didn't get it then. Now I do. Because growing up, that's what my mom did. Even when things were tight, even when my dad came home exhausted, she found something to laugh about: a burnt pancake that looked like the map of Korea, or the neighbor's rooster that crowed at midnight like it was confused about time zones. Somehow, laughter turned our little house into a warm planet orbiting in chaos. It's funny how you don't realize you've inherited something until you see it appear in your own life. I caught myself doing the same thing on tour, once cracking jokes when everyone was too tired to move. I think it's instinct. A way of saying, we're still alive, so we might as well laugh. My mom taught me that without ever using words. She just did it. She turned survival into comedy. You know who reminds me of her sometimes? Jin. He can take the most stressful moment and turn it into a sitcom. We could be about to go on stage in front of 60,000 people, nerves everywhere, and he'll whisper, "Don't trip, but if you do, make it look intentional." And somehow that line breaks all the tension. He'll always pretend it's just for laughs, but he knows what he's doing. Humor is medicine disguised as mischief. That's when I realized another part of my dad's advice. Find a wife like your mother isn't just about kindness, it's about humor that heals. It's about finding someone who knows how to make tragedy blink first. Someone who doesn't let life have the last laugh. There is this story my dad loves to tell. It's from their first year of marriage, when everything they owned could fit into 2 suitcases and 1 rice cooker. One evening, they were so broke they couldn't afford meat. So my mom cooked plain rice and put soy sauce on it. My dad said, "Is this dinner?" And she answered, "No, it's a performance. You're the audience." Then she bowed. He laughed so hard he forgot to be sad. That's when he knew she was the one. Because anyone who can turn emptiness into joy is basically magic. I think about that whenever people ask me about relationships. They always expect some deep answer, like mutual growth or communication. Sure, that's important. But honestly, find someone who can make you laugh when you want to cry. Because laughter is proof you're still choosing light over darkness. And that's the kind of person who'll keep you human when the world turns mechanical. Speaking of mechanical, have you ever noticed how weirdly robotic life gets when you stop noticing the little things? It's like every day is copy-paste. Wake up, scroll, work, eat, sleep, repeat. That's when you start feeling invisible. I saw that happen to a friend, once a producer I worked with. He told me, "Jungkook, every day feels like someone pressed the replay button on my life." I said, "Bro, maybe you just need a new playlist." We laughed, but he actually took it seriously and started learning guitar. Now he says he feels alive again. Sometimes humor isn't just about laughing, it's about daring to imagine something different. And that's what my mom has always done. She refuses to live the same day twice. Even her grocery trips are adventures. She once texted me, "Guess what I bought?" I said, "Tofu?" She said, "Wrong. Freedom." It was just shampoo on sale, but the confidence sold me. My dad calls it her creative optimism. I call it survival with sparkle. When I told J-Hope about that, he said, "Your mom sounds like she could run a motivation seminar." I said, "She already does." It's called Every Phone Call We've Ever Had. Sometimes I think she and J-Hope share the same DNA, pure sunshine, unreasonably happy, probably powered by positive energy drinks. I asked him once, "How do you stay so upbeat?" And he said, "Because someone has to be the light switch when everyone else forgets the room still has power." That line stuck with me. That's what my mom does. She keeps the light on, even when no one says thank you. One day, while we were rehearsing, I told the guys about my dad's quote again. Taehyung, being Taehyung, said, "So you're looking for someone who can cook, joke, and fix your laundry mistakes?" I said, "Basically." He said, "Bro, that's 3 different people." And then he winked. But later that night, he texted me, "Your dad's smart. Real love is the combination of soft and strong." That's the thing about Taehyung. He'll clown you in public, but drop wisdom, like a monk, in private. The more I thought about it, the more I realized my dad wasn't setting me up with a checklist, he was showing me a mirror. He wanted me to become the kind of person who could handle that kind of love. Because it's not just about finding someone patient, it's about being someone who deserves their patience. That hit hard. It's easy to say you want a good partner. It's harder to admit you have to grow into one first. I think about that whenever I see my parents now. They're not the same people they were when they met. They grew together, sometimes awkwardly, sometimes beautifully. Like 2 vines tangled around the same fence they've stretched, bent, survived storms, but they never let go. And every time I go home, I see that love in the smallest gestures. The way my dad pours her tea before his own. The way she pretends not to see him sneaking snacks. It's those micro moments that make the macro last. Once, during a family dinner, my mom said, "Love is like kimchi. It smells weird at first, but once you get used to it, you can't live without it." My dad almost spit out his soup laughing. I said, "That's the most Korean thing I've ever heard." But she was right. Love ferments. It takes time, pressure, and patience before it tastes right. You can't rush it. You can't microwave it. You have to let it sit, bubble, and become something new. And if I'm being honest, I see that same process in BTS. We've been fermenting together for years, turning mistakes into flavor, pain into art, exhaustion into laughter. Some days were spicy, some days were sour, but we're always real. Maybe that's why we've lasted so long. Sometimes people ask me, what's the secret to staying close as a group? And I always say, we forgive quickly. That's something I learned from my mom. She can't stay mad longer than a K-drama episode. My dad once forgot their anniversary, and she just said, "That's okay, I forgot your socks in the laundry. We're even. That's emotional martial arts right there, deflecting anger with humor. I try to practice that too. When something goes wrong, instead of reacting, I breathe and say something ridiculous like, well, at least we're burning calories from stress. It usually works. Laughter resets the system. I used to think maturity meant being serious all the time. Now I know it's being able to stay soft in serious moments. That's what my parents do. That's what the guys do. That's what I'm learning. To stay soft even when life gets hard. To stay funny even when things hurt. Because humor doesn't mean you don't care. It means you still believe there's something worth caring about. So when my dad said, find a wife like your mother, I don't hear rules anymore. I hear rhythm. I hear, find someone who'll laugh with you at 2 a.m. when you're both lost. I hear, find someone who can look at chaos and still choose to dance. That's the kind of love I want. And that's the kind of person I want to be. Maybe one day, when I have kids, I'll tell them the same thing. Maybe my son will roll his eyes and say, okay, Dad, while scrolling on his futuristic phone that also cooks ramen. But someday, he'll understand. He'll burn water like I did. He'll meet someone patient enough to laugh with him instead of scolding him. And then he'll remember my words and hopefully hug his mom too. Until then, I'm learning. I'm still the son who forgets to call home sometimes, the friend who says sorry through jokes, the artist who's still figuring out what love really looks like. But every day, I get a little closer. Every time I make someone laugh when they want to cry, I feel like I'm honoring my parents' love story. Because maybe that's what legacy really is. Not fame, not money, but passing down warmth disguised as humor. The kind that doesn't fade with time, the kind that makes people feel safe enough to laugh again. And if you're listening to this right now, wherever you are, I want you to remember this. You don't have to be perfect to deserve love. You just have to stay human enough to laugh at your imperfections. That's what my mom taught me. That's what my dad meant. And that's what I'll keep trying to live by, one bad joke and one good hug at a time. When I woke up the next morning after that long talk with Mom, I swear even the sunlight looked judgmental. It hit me straight in the eyes like, so, philosopher Jungkook, did you fold your laundry properly this time? I stared at the pile of shirts on my chair and said out loud, we'll talk about that later. That's when I realized I'd officially become my father negotiating with clothing before coffee. I went downstairs and found my mom making breakfast, humming that same trot song she's been obsessed with since 1998. My dad was sitting at the table, pretending to read the newspaper, which was upside down. Classic. I joined them, and before I could even pour my coffee, my mom said, so, have you found her yet? I almost spit out the water. Found who? She smiled like a detective who already knows the answer. Your future wife. The one like me. My dad started laughing so hard, he nearly dropped his chopsticks. Good luck, son. They don't make that model anymore. That's my parents for you. One throws you into an existential crisis before breakfast, the other turns it into stand-up comedy. After that conversation, I couldn't stop thinking about it. What does it even mean to find someone like Mom in a world where everything feels temporary? People change jobs, homes, hair colors, even entire identities, like they're switching playlists. But my mom, she's steady. She's Wi-Fi in human form. Always there, rarely complains, occasionally disconnects, just to remind you who's in charge. Later that week, I had dinner with Namjoon. I told him the story. He said, your dad's advice is deeper than it sounds. He's basically saying, find someone whose character doesn't expire. Leave it to him to turn love into a philosophical TED Talk. He added, your mom represents timelessness in a world addicted to updates. I said, bro, can you write that on a t-shirt? It sounds expensive. We laughed, but he was right. My mom is the anti-update. She still uses the same phone case from 2014. It's cracked, but it works just like her patience. That night, I texted my mom a thank you message. She replied with a thumbs up emoji and a link to a YouTube recipe titled How to Fold Towels Like a Pro. Subtle, Mom. The next day, we had dance practice, and my brain was still spinning with all these thoughts about love, family, and laundry. During a break, Jimin looked at me and said, you're thinking too hard. Did your mom yell at you again? I said, no, worse. She inspired me. He blinked. Ah, emotional damage. I told the guys about my dad's advice. Jin clapped his hands dramatically. A wife like your mom? Impossible. She's too powerful. Yoongi looked up from his phone and muttered, "You just want someone who'll cook better than you." I said, "That's not hard." Everyone laughed. But Taehyung got quiet and said, "You know what's crazy? Parents love each other so calmly. We love like it's an Olympic sport." That hit me. Maybe he's right. My parents' generation loved quietly, consistently. No social media posts, no matching pajamas, no heart emojis, just decades of showing up. I told him they didn't need followers to feel followed. He grinned. "Deep, bro. You should post that." I said, "No way." Mom would comment correcting my grammar. We talked more that night. Yoongi said his mom always told him that love isn't about fireworks. It's about who sits next to you when the lights go out. Jin said his dad told him, "Marry someone who eats with joy. Sad eaters make sad homes." I realized our parents' generation spoke in poetry disguised as practical advice. They were teaching survival with metaphors. That conversation stayed with me for days. Every time I saw an older couple walking slowly together, I thought of my parents. How many jokes, arguments, and apologies must fit between two people walking in silence? How many inside jokes keep them going when the world stops being kind? A few weeks later, I went to visit them again. I brought gifts, matching t-shirts that said, "Forever 1985. My dad wore his immediately. My mom said, "I'll wear mine when you iron it." She knows I don't know how to iron. That's her humor, gentle sabotage. We had dinner, and halfway through, my dad said, "Do you know why I told you that, son?" I said, "Because you wanted to confuse me for 20 years? He laughed. "No, because one day, you'll realize love isn't about finding someone who completes you. It's about finding someone who doesn't quit on you when you act incomplete." That sentence hit me harder than any lyric I've ever written. He didn't even look up when he said it. He just kept eating kimchi like it was casual philosophy. My mom rolled her eyes, but smiled. He's been waiting years to say that. After dinner, I sat outside with them. The sky was this perfect navy, the kind that makes you feel small in a good way. My mom was sipping tea, my dad checking his phone brightness like it's rocket science. I asked, "Do you ever get tired of each other?" My mom said, "Every Tuesday." Then she smiled. "But every Wednesday, we start again." That's marriage in one line, daily resurrection. It made me wonder if I'm ready for that kind of commitment. Touring, performing, constantly moving, it's easy to feel like love's just another schedule conflict waiting to happen. But my dad said, love isn't about time management, it's about energy management. He said, when you care, you make energy. When you stop caring, everything becomes heavy. He's right. I've seen it happen even in my work. When I love what I'm doing, I could rehearse for 10 hours and still feel alive. When I don't, 10 minutes feels like a year. Love is the same. It's the invisible engine that keeps you moving. That night, before I left, my mom gave me a small box. "Open it later," she said. Inside was a folded note and a photo. The note said, "This is your father before he learned to cook rice." The photo showed my dad, 20-something, holding a burnt pot and smiling like he just invented comedy. On the back, she'd written, "If I could love this, I can love anything." I laughed so hard I nearly dropped it. But then, I sat there staring at it for a long time. Because that's love, a willingness to find beauty in burnt rice. When I got back to Seoul, I couldn't stop telling everyone about it. During rehearsal, I showed the picture to the guys. Hobie laughed until he cried. "Bro, your dad looks like he just discovered fire." RM said, "No, that's the face of a man who knows his wife will forgive him." That night, I wrote in my journal, "Love is forgiveness with good timing. It's knowing when to say sorry and when to make the other person laugh instead." And I realized something huge. My dad didn't marry my mom because she was perfect. He married her because she was real, and she made being real feel safe. Maybe that's what everyone's really looking for. Not someone flawless, but someone fearless enough to stay. A few days later, I was back in Seoul, standing in my kitchen trying to make breakfast like a responsible adult. I say trying because when I cracked the first egg, it somehow landed on the floor and stared up at me like, "Really? This is who you've become?" I cleaned it up, sighed dramatically, and whispered, "Mom would have never let this happen." And that's when I realized adulthood is just realizing your parents were right about almost everything except maybe haircuts. As I was cooking, or performing an emotional experiment, depending on how you look at it, I started thinking about my parents' dynamic again. My dad's quiet wisdom, my mom's endless patience. Their partnership feels like a song. One person sings the melody, the other holds the harmony. You only notice how beautiful it is when you listen carefully. I texted my dad a picture of my breakfast burnt toast, lonely egg, coffee that looked suspiciously like sadness, and he replied, "Proud of you. The egg lived an honorable life." That's his humor. Dad jokes so dry they could absorb oil spills. But underneath the sarcasm, he's saying, "You tried. That's enough." And that's how he's always loved me, not through praise, but through presence. Later that day, I went to the studio. The guys were already there. RM was writing lyrics, Yoongi was adjusting some beats, and Jimin was, well, eating everyone's snacks again. I told him about the egg incident, and Hobie immediately laughed so hard he had to sit down. "You? The golden maknae who can do everything, can't make breakfast?" I said, "Cooking eggs isn't the same as cooking emotions." He said, "Neither is burning them." We laughed. But then, the conversation turned unexpectedly serious. Jimin said, "You know, your dad's advice makes sense in ways people don't realize." I asked him what he meant. He said, "He wasn't just talking about your mom. He was describing a lifestyle, choosing patience over perfection." He's right. I never saw my parents chasing trends, competing with others, or pretending to be happy. They built a quiet kind of joy that didn't need witnesses. That stuck with me. Because fame is the opposite. It's all witnesses. All the time. Every emotion gets magnified. Every mistake gets broadcasted. And in that world, you start craving something steady. Someone who doesn't care about your popularity, just whether you've eaten. That's what my dad found in my mom, and that's what I hope to find too. A few days later, I called my mom again. I said, "Mom, how do you stay calm when dad annoys you?" She said, "Oh, I don't. I just make him think I am." I laughed, but she was serious. Patience isn't pretending not to care, Jungkook. It's caring without performing. That one sentence hit me harder than caffeine on an empty stomach. That's her secret. She doesn't dramatize her love. She just lives it. When I think back, all my happiest memories aren't about big moments, they're about small ones. The way she folded my uniform before school. The way she'd sing while hanging laundry. The way she'd listen to me talk about dreams that sounded impossible and say, "Then do it." Not "be careful." Not "maybe next time." Just "then do it." That's faith disguised as parenting. And now that I'm older, I realize that's also how love should feel. Not controlling, not demanding, but believing even when it looks foolish. My dad always says, "Your mom believed in me so much I had no choice but to live up to it." That's how powerful belief can be. It builds people. When I told Jin that line, he nodded like a sage and said, "That's why I always tell you you're handsome. Maybe one day you'll believe me." I said, "I already do." He said, "Good. Now act like it and do the dishes." That's Jin's love language encouragement with chores attached. But you know what's interesting? My mom and dad's story isn't perfect. They've had fights. Big ones. Once, when I was a kid, they argued about something so small, I can't even remember what it was. My dad went outside to cool off, and I followed him. He was sitting on the porch, quiet. I asked, "Are you mad?" He said, "No, just listening." I said, "To what?" He smiled. "To the part of me that's wrong." I didn't understand it then, but now I think about that sentence all the time. Listening to the part of you that's wrong, that's what makes love work. It's not about being right, it's about being willing to hear what hurts. I remember telling Namjoon that story once. He said, "That's emotional intelligence at its peak." I said, "Yeah, but he still forgot mom's birthday the next day." Namjoon said, "That's emotional intelligence minus calendar management." We laughed, but I learned something from it. Wisdom doesn't mean perfection, it just means awareness. My dad knows when he's wrong, my mom knows when he's tired. Together, they make space for each other's flaws instead of competing to fix them. And that's when it hit me. That's what my father meant all along. Find someone like your mother, not because she's perfect, but because she makes imperfection livable. A few nights later, I was out with Taehyung. We were sitting on a rooftop, eating tteokbokki, talking about random things like always. He said, "You know what's funny? People always say they want love, like in the movies. But in real life, no one wants to sit through the credits." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, Everyone wants the highlight reel, not the behind the scenes mess. I laughed, but he was right again. The best parts of love aren't cinematic, they're maintenance work. My parents' relationship is 90% maintenance, 10% chaos, and 100% choice. Every day, they wake up and choose each other again. Not because it's easy, but because they've seen what life looks like without that choice, and they'd rather not go back. So I started trying to apply that in my own life. Every morning, I tell myself, choose gratitude. Even when I'm tired, even when my voice cracks, even when schedules are crazy. Because gratitude turns ordinary days into something worth remembering. My mom always says, if you can laugh once a day, you're rich. Now, when something goes wrong, I try to find the humor in it first. Like the time I spilled coffee on my lyrics. At first, I panicked. Then I looked at the stain and realized it looked like a heart. I took a photo and sent it to my mom. She replied, "See? Even your mistakes love you." How do moms do that? Turn disasters into therapy? She later told me, "That's the secret, Jungkook. Don't hide your mess, redeem it." And honestly, that's what makes her my role model. She doesn't hide chaos, she recycles it. When we were kids, she used to save broken mugs and turn them into flower pots. She said, if it can't hold coffee, let it hold beauty. And that's when I realized why my dad fell for her. She's the kind of person who plants life where others see waste. Sometimes, when I think about love now, I imagine that mug cracked, imperfect, still holding something alive. Maybe that's what I'm searching for. Not perfection, just someone willing to plant flowers in my flaws. There's this moment that comes when you've been thinking too much about love. Suddenly, every small thing starts looking like a life lesson. I was in a cafe, waiting for my iced Americano, when the barista accidentally gave me someone else's drink. I looked at the cup. It said, Sunghoon Extra Sweet. I laughed to myself and thought, that's exactly what mom would order for dad if she could upgrade him. I sat down, sipping the wrong drink, and for some reason it reminded me of her again. My mom doesn't even drink coffee, she says. Caffeine makes her heart race, and one man causing me stress is enough. But every time I see couples in cafes, sharing desserts and wiping cream off each other's noses like a K-drama audition, I think of my parents and how their version of romance was totally different. No grand gestures, just consistency, just showing up. When I was younger, I used to think love needed to be spectacular. Flash mobs, balloons, fireworks. Then I watched my dad quietly warm my mom's car in winter before she drove to the market. That's love too, no hashtags required. I texted Jimin that line. He replied, bro, if you ever write a book, call it no hashtags required. Then he sent a photo of him eating ice cream at 2 a.m. Caption, this is my love language. Sometimes I think my friends exist solely to keep me from getting too serious. Later that week, we had rehearsals. Everyone was tired. The choreography was complicated, tempers short. In the middle of it all, Taehyung messed up the timing. And instead of getting mad, I started laughing. Not out of mockery, just relief. That laugh spread like wildfire. Suddenly, everyone was cracking up, the tension gone. Afterwards, Namjoon said, see, that's your mom's DNA. You diffuse bombs with laughter. He's right. That's the legacy she gave me, the ability to laugh, even when life isn't funny. My father fights storms, my mother dances in rain. I'm somewhere in between, trying to find balance with wet shoes. That night, I called home again. My dad answered. I asked him, Appa, did you ever think you'd be with mom this long? He chuckled. Son, every anniversary I think she's going to change her mind. So I just keep trying to deserve tomorrow. Then he paused. But don't tell her I said that, or she'll raise the rent. We talked for nearly an hour. At one point, he said something that stopped me cold. Do you know why I told you to find someone like her? Because she made me grow up without making me feel small. I didn't respond for a few seconds. That's the purest description of love I've ever heard. Later, while lying in bed, I wrote it in my notes app. Grow up without making them feel small. Maybe that's what love really is. Mutual evolution, not domination. The next morning, our manager reminded us we had a TV shoot. Everyone was sleepy. On the ride there, Jin told us a joke so bad the entire van went silent. Then he grinned and said, silence is laughter's cousin. I swear, my mom would have liked that joke. She loves confident nonsense. During the break, I caught myself humming the tune she always sings while cooking. J-Hope heard it and joined in, adding random beatboxing. Before long, the staff started clapping along. And that's what I love about these guys, they can turn any quiet moment into music. My parents did that too, in their own way. Sometimes when I look around during tours, lights flashing, fans screaming, chaos everywhere, I think about how simple my parents' world is. No fancy stages, no interviews, just two people who made an entire life out of rice, laughter, and stubborn loyalty. It makes me want that kind of peace one day. Maybe that's why I hug them tighter every time I visit home. It's not guilt, it's gratitude. Gratitude that they built a love strong enough to echo through me, through every note I sing, through every friend who's become family. After our last concert of the season, I flew home secretly. No schedule, no cameras, just me, a suitcase, and the need to smell home again. I arrived late, everyone was asleep. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of kimchi stew and my mom yelling from the kitchen, "Who left the fridge door open?" I said, "I just got here." She yelled back, "Then close it first and talk later." That's my welcome ceremony, domestic affection disguised as discipline. Over breakfast, she asked, "So, any progress finding that wife like me?" I groaned. "Mom, why are you obsessed?" She smiled. "Because I want someone else to remind you to eat." I said, "That's what Jimin does." She laughed. "He's too small to protect you. Find someone taller." We both laughed until my dad walked in and said, "He should find someone who can cook. I'm tired of sending food containers to Seoul." My mom threw him a look that could melt glaciers. "You didn't cook." "I did." He winked. "Exactly. And look how well that worked." She rolled her eyes, muttering something about men and selective memory. I just sat there, thinking, this is love in surround sound. After breakfast, my dad followed me outside. He said quietly, "When you were little, you asked why your mom and I never gave up on each other. I didn't know how to explain it then. Now I do. It's because we never quit on laughter." That sentence stayed in my chest all day. I think about how laughter carries us, how it builds bridges between generations, between friends, even between the parts of ourselves we don't like. In the car back to Seoul, I scrolled through photos on my phone, old tour pictures, goofy selfies, fan signs, so many smiles. And I realized my parents' legacy isn't just theirs, it's mine now. Every time I laugh on stage, every time I turn exhaustion into a joke, I'm continuing what they started. When I reached the dorm, the guys were eating delivery food. Taehyung yelled, "Welcome home, married man." I said, "What?" He smirked. "Your aura changed. You smell like wisdom." J-Hope added, "Or kimchi stew." I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my bag. That's when I realized I didn't need to be married yet to live, like someone who understands love. I just needed to practice it daily with my friends, my family, myself. Before bed that night, I sent my mom a photo of me smiling with the guys. I texted, "Don't worry, I'm eating." She replied, "Good, but are you folding?" Classic mom. There's a strange quiet that happens the first night you come home after a long tour. The stage lights still buzz inside your head, your suitcase smells like airports, and yet the house is too still, like it's politely waiting for you to remember how to live there again. I dropped my bag by the door, stared at the familiar walls, and whispered, "Okay, house, don't act brand new." It echoed back nothing, which felt about right. I walked into the living room and saw the family photos. Mom keeps adding every year. There I was at 15, holding a cheap trophy with a haircut that could have started a fan war. Next to it, one from last year, same smile, just a slightly less confused haircut. And behind all those frames, I could almost hear my parents laughing in the kitchen, the clatter of plates, the rhythm of two people who've learned every line of each other's lives. It made me think of something my father once said when I asked how he knew mom was the one. He said, "Because when I'm with her, I stop auditioning." At 20, I didn't get it. At 27, I did. The world keeps making you perform school, work, fame, even friendships sometimes, but home is the place where you can finally exhale. I sat down on the sofa, half expecting mom to appear with a snack and a sermon. Instead, she texted, "There's soup in the fridge. Don't microwave the metal bowl again. The woman never forgets." I sent back a heart emoji, and she replied with the thumbs up, the universal sign for conversation over. While eating, I thought about how weird it is that my parents built an entire universe out of repetition. Same breakfast every morning, same arguments about the remote, same way they fall asleep watching the news. But maybe repetition isn't boring. Maybe it's devotion in disguise. Every same is another still cooking, still trying, still here. The next day, I met up with Namjoon for coffee. He had that philosopher look again, hoodie, notebook, existential caffeine aura. I told him about the photos, the soup, the deja vu of home. He nodded. You know what that is, right? That's rhythm. People think love is melody. Pretty, changing, exciting. But rhythm keeps the song alive. I said, bro, you sound like a Spotify advertisement for marriage. He laughed. Maybe. But think about it. Melody is what you notice first. Rhythm is what you miss when it's gone. He's right. When my parents aren't together, the house feels offbeat, like the world forgot its timing. I told him that, and he said, then find someone who syncs with you, not someone who steals your solo. I nearly spit out my Americano. Did you just turn relationship advice into a band metaphor? He grinned. I'm on brand. Later that night, I wrote those words down. Find someone who syncs, not someone who steals your solo. Maybe that's what Dad meant too. A few days later, I was filming content with the guys. Between takes, Jin asked, so, philosopher Jungkook, any new wisdom from your parents' fan club? I said, yeah, apparently love is rhythm. He nodded solemnly. Good. Then why do you always sing ahead of the beat? Everyone burst out laughing. Even the camera crew lost it. That's what I love about these guys, they roast you until enlightenment. After filming, Jimin and I went for a late night walk. He said, you talk about your parents a lot these days. I said, because I keep realizing how much of them is in me. He smiled. Then you're already halfway to finding your future wife. I looked at him. How do you figure? Because you already know what love sounds like. We walked past a group of street performers dancing under the neon lights. They weren't perfect, but they were having fun, laughing, missing beats, cheering each other on. It reminded me of practice days, when we were all younger, hungrier, and way more dramatic. I turned to Jimin and said, do you ever think about how much we've changed? He said, every time I look at your hair. Still, he's right again. Change happens, but the roots stay. And for me, those roots are mom and dad. Their love taught me endurance, the quiet kind that doesn't make headlines but makes history. When I got home that night, Mom was watching a drama, crying. I asked what happened. She said, he finally apologized after 12 episodes. I said, that's just Tuesday in real life for you and Dad. She threw a tissue at me. Watch before you judge. Then Dad walked in, looked at the screen, and said, he's lying. You can tell by the eyebrows. They started arguing about fictional characters like they were family members. I couldn't stop laughing. In that moment, I thought, I want this someday, the kind of love where even arguing feels like home. Not dramatic, not distant, just familiar. Before bed, I posted a photo of my parents' hands intertwined, captioned, still holding. Fans flooded the comments. Couple goals. Protect them at all costs. But what I really wanted to write was, this is what steady looks like. It's not always shiny, but it never breaks. The next morning, Dad sent me a text. Don't make us famous. Mom followed with, tell them I'm younger than I look. I replied, sure, influencer parents. Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever find someone like her. Not a copy, just someone with the same gentle chaos, the same unspoken faith, that no matter what happens, everything will be okay. And maybe, when I do, I'll finally understand the full meaning behind Dad's sentence. But until then, I'll keep learning from their laughter, folding my own shirts, wrongly, and trying to build a rhythm that lasts. That night, I couldn't sleep. The city outside my window pulsed like a heartbeat, distant traffic, soft rain, a stray cat auditioning for a horror movie. I lay there thinking about what home actually means. It's funny how the older you get, the less it feels like a location, and the more it feels like a rhythm you recognize. When I was younger, I thought home was a building. Now I think it's a person, or several people, who accidentally formed a family around your chaos. My parents did that first. The guys did it later. And somehow, both versions smell like kimchi stew and late night laughter. I remembered a moment from tour in Brazil. We had just finished a massive show. The crowd was wild, the lights blinding. After we bowed, I looked at the others, sweat, exhaustion, joy, and for a second, It felt exactly like sitting at my parents' kitchen table. The same warmth, the same unspoken gratitude. Maybe that's why I never get tired of performing. Every stage becomes another living room. A few days later, I video called my parents from the studio. Mom answered first, wearing a face mask that made her look like a superhero on her day off. Dad appeared behind her, holding a frying pan like it was a trophy. "Guess what I cooked?" he said. I said, "A disaster?" He laughed. "Close. Fried rice." Mom rolled her eyes. "It's only fried if the pan survives." They bickered playfully for a minute, and I just sat there grinning. "You two never change," I said. Dad winked. "Why would we? It works." After the call ended, I felt lighter. People chase inspiration in books or mountains, but sometimes it's hiding in two middle-aged people arguing about soy sauce. Later that week, I was recording vocals for a song about growing up. The lyrics were serious, nostalgia, time, the fear of fading relevance. But halfway through, I started smiling. The producer asked why. I said, "Because I just realized I'm becoming my parents, and that's not a bad thing." He laughed. "Then sing it like that." So I did. The take came out warmer than any before. That's when it hit me, love leaves fingerprints on your art, even when you think you're working alone. That evening, we had dinner as a group. Jin was bragging about his cooking again. J-Hope was filming everything for content, and Yoongi kept pretending he didn't care while secretly monitoring the temperature of the meat like a scientist. I sat back and thought, this is what home feels like. Chaos that doesn't scare you. Mid-meal Taehyung looked at me and said, "You've been smiling a lot lately. Did you fall in love?" I said, "Yeah, with peace." He nodded. "Good choice. Less paperwork." The table burst into laughter, and I caught myself thinking, if my dad could see this, he'd approve. He always said, "You'll know you're with the right people when laughter eats before pride." That's exactly what happens with us, no matter how serious life gets. Someone always makes it ridiculous enough to bear. That night, I texted my mom. "Appa said laughter eats before pride." She replied, "Tell him that's why he's still alive." The next morning, I woke up early and went for a run. Seoul was half asleep, streets wet from the rain, the smell of coffee and taxis mixing in the air. I stopped at a park bench, caught my breath, and suddenly remembered the first time Dad taught me to ride a bike. He said, "If you fall, laugh before you cry. It confuses pain." Maybe that's what love does too, confuses pain until it forgets it was supposed to hurt. I sat there, watching the sunrise, and whispered, "Thanks, Appa, I get it now." On the way back, I bought flowers for Mom. Not roses or anything dramatic, just daisies. She loves daisies because, in her words, they mind their business. I sent them with a note. "Thanks for teaching me to fold feelings neatly, even when they're messy." She texted a photo of the flowers on the dining table with Dad in the background holding his fried rice. Caption, "He says he cooked again." I laughed so hard, I nearly dropped my phone. That photo summed up everything. Love, comedy, imperfection, and the quiet miracle of people who keep choosing each other. That night, before sleep, I wrote in my journal, maybe finding someone like Mom isn't about similarity. It's about substance. Someone whose love doesn't need an audience, whose laughter can resurrect a dull morning, whose patience outlives the argument. And I realized the real lesson my father gave me wasn't a checklist for a partner. It was a manual for becoming one. Sometimes, after the last encore fades and the crowd's roar dissolves into the night, I stand backstage and realize how loud silence can be. The lights go dark, the confetti settles, and suddenly it's just me. Sweat, breath, heartbeat. That's when I always hear my father's voice again. Find someone like your mother. But now it means something different. It isn't about marriage anymore. It's about balance. Finding something or someone that anchors me when the applause stops. The industry loves noise. It trains you to chase volume. Higher charts, brighter stages, bigger screens. But my mom once told me, even thunder takes breaks. She said it while watering her plants, as if the universe had time to listen. That's the difference between her world and mine. She waters leaves. I water pixels. And honestly, her leaves look happier. After one particularly chaotic week of rehearsals, I flew home unannounced. When I walked in, Mom didn't even look surprised. She just said, "There's rice in the cooker," and kept stirring the soup. Dad peeked from behind the fridge door, whispering, Your mother said she felt it this morning. Apparently, maternal Wi-Fi has global coverage. Over dinner, they talked about retirement plans. A small cafe somewhere quiet, maybe by the sea. Mom wants to bake, Dad wants to supervise customers. I said, "You mean drink coffee and brag about discounts?" He said, "Exactly." They laughed for a full minute, the kind of laughter that fills every corner of the house. It made me realize that their dreams never needed to be spectacular to be beautiful. They just needed to be shared. When I left that night, Mom gave me a packed lunch. She said, "For tomorrow's meeting." I said, "Mom, I'm not in school anymore." She said, "Exactly why you need it. There's no logic that can beat mother logic." Back in Seoul, I sat in the studio eating her kimbap while reading new song drafts. One lyric caught me. "If fame is a flame, home is the candle that started it." I stared at that line for a long time. Because maybe success isn't supposed to outshine its source, it's supposed to honor it. Later that week, I told the guys, I think I want to write a song about family. Jeon, our fictional producer, smiled. "Then don't write about them," he said. "Write like them patiently." So we did. We built the melody the way my parents build breakfast. Small, familiar, a rhythm that knows its place. When the chorus came, I sang it softly. I don't need more lights. I just need more mornings, where love pours coffee before words. Yeowon stopped the track. He said, "That's it. That's the truth." And for the first time in a long time, I felt peaceful in the studio. That night, the group gathered on the dorm balcony. We talked about everything: future plans, secret worries, Taehyung's new dog that keeps chewing microphones. At one point, Hano, the group's sunshine, said, "Do you ever think about what you'll do when this all slows down?" Everyone went quiet. Then I said, "Maybe I'll open a cafe next to my parents. Live band on weekend." They laughed, but not like it was impossible, like it was inevitable. Sometimes I wonder if that's what my father meant all along. Find someone like your mother wasn't about romance. It was about rhythm, humility, humor, the ingredients that turn chaos into comfort. Maybe he was preparing me for life itself, not just love. A few days later, I visited a youth center for a small event. There was a boy there, maybe 16, who asked, "Hyung, how do you keep going when you're tired?" I said, "I don't. I stop, eat, call my mom, and then I go again." He laughed, thinking I was joking. But that's the real secret. Rest doesn't ruin your rhythm. It keeps you in tune. When I got home that night, I found a message from Dad. "Your mom found an old photo of you dancing in the living room. She says your hair was a crime, but your joy was pure." I replied, "Tell her the hair was a phase, the joy is permanent." He wrote back, "That's the kind of thing your mother would say. You're becoming her." I smiled. If that's true, maybe that's the best compliment I'll ever get. Before sleeping, I looked around my apartment, messy, loud, lived in. I realized it finally felt like home. Not because it was clean or organized, but because laughter had been there recently. Maybe that's all it takes. Not perfection, just presence. When the group finally took a break after months of travel, I packed a small bag, turned off my phone notifications, and headed for the coast. My parents had actually done it, opened that little cafe by the sea. They called it Still Here. Mom said it was because every couple that survives 40 years deserves a declaration. Dad said it was because the sign was on discount. They're both right. The train ride felt unreal. No schedules, no stylists, just the rhythm of tracks and a bag full of instant noodles I probably wouldn't need. I looked out the window at the fields passing by and wondered when I'd last sat this still. Fame teaches you motion, home teaches you meaning. When I arrived, the cafe stood between two pine trees like it had been waiting its whole life. The sign was slightly crooked, Dad's handiwork, obviously. Inside smelled like roasted beans and hope. Mom was behind the counter wearing an apron that said "World's Okayest Barista." Dad was wiping tables like he was training for the Olympics. "Look who remembered his family," Mom shouted. "I was always coming," I said. She smirked. "Sure, I could hear it in the way you didn't call for 3 weeks." I dropped my bag and hugged her. She smelled like coffee and detergent, the two pillars of Korean love. Dad grinned. "Want to see the ocean first, or help with dishes?" "Let me think ocean," I said. "Wrong answer," he said. handing me a towel. We spent the next hour washing mugs, while customers trickled in locals, fishermen, a few curious students. Everyone seemed to know my parents already. They greeted them by name, and my dad greeted everyone by giving unsolicited life advice. "You need more fiber," he told one poor college kid buying a donut, "and less complaining." Later, we walked along the beach together. The wind carried salt and laughter. Mom picked up seashells, Dad skipped stones, and missed all but one. He looked at me and said, "See? Even failure makes ripples. Leave it to him to turn clumsiness into philosophy." We sat on a bench watching the horizon. I asked, "Do you miss the city?" Mom shook her head. "No. The sea claps for us every morning. That's enough." Dad added, "Plus, parking's free." I laughed so hard the seagulls stared. That evening, after closing the cafe, we had dinner together, grilled fish, kimchi, and the loudest piece imaginable. Between bites, Mom said, "You look tired but happy." I nodded. "I think that's the correct ratio." She leaned back. "That's how it starts. Tired from chasing things, happy from finding yourself again." Dad poured us barley tea. "You know, when you were a kid, you used to sing at the sea. You said the waves clapped better than your classmates." I smiled. "They still do." He looked at me seriously. "You'll come back to the sea more often. It reminds you that sound is just movement with purpose. Same as life." Later that night, I helped Mom close up the cafe. She turned off the lights, leaving only the soft glow from the espresso machine. "It looks peaceful," I said. She nodded. "That's because it's honest. The secret to peace is not pretending you have more energy than you do." As we cleaned, an old couple came in regulars, apparently. The woman asked, "Are you their son?" Mom answered for me, "Yes, but he belongs to the city. We just lease him when he's tired." The old woman laughed. "You raised him well." Mom winked. "Still working on it." After they left, I asked, "Do you ever wish you'd done something else?" She looked out the window. "Every life has versions we don't live, but I like this one best. It has good coffee and a son who visits sometimes." I didn't know what to say, so I just hugged her again. She patted my back like I was still 10. "Go rest," she said. "Tomorrow you'll help me bake." I groaned. "Mom, baking scares me." "Good. Fear keeps you humble." That night, I stayed in the small guest room upstairs. The walls hummed with ocean wind. For the first time in months, I slept without earphones or alarms. The next morning, the smell of bread woke me. Mom was already mixing dough. Dad was adjusting the cafe playlist. He looked up. "We've been arguing about music. Your mom wants jazz. I want trot." "Compromise with silence?" I offered. "Silence?" Mom said. "We're Korean, not monks." Customers started coming in again. Some recognized me, but no one made a fuss. I served coffee, wiped tables, and even attempted latte art that looked like existential sadness. One little girl asked, "Are you famous?" I said, "Only to my parents." She nodded seriously. "That's the best kind." At lunch break, Dad handed me a notebook. Inside were recipes, doodles, random wisdom like "Don't reheat rice twice," and "Patience tastes better than sugar." He said, "Write your own page." So I did. I wrote, "Home is not where you rest. It's where you restart." When we closed that evening, Mom asked if I'd sing. "Just one song," she said. I hesitated. "For who?" "For the sea. It claps better than customers." So I sang. Softly at first, then louder, the melody carried by salt and memory. My parents sat together at the doorway, hands clasped, swaying like the tide. And as the last note disappeared into the night, I realized I wasn't performing. I was praying in my own language of laughter and sound. Maybe that's what my father's advice really meant. Find someone like your mother didn't mean marry a clone. It meant find peace that laughs with you, patience that survives you, and a love that teaches you to come home even when you're far away. The last night at my parents' cafe felt different. The air was quiet in that heavy, generous way the sea knows how to give silence. We'd closed early because Dad wanted to experiment with a new espresso recipe. It tasted like confusion and regret. Mom said, "Congratulations, you invented disappointment." He bowed. "As long as it's artisanal." They laughed. And I thought, this is what forever sounds like. After dinner, I walked outside. The moon hung low over the ocean, yellow like an old lamp, and the waves kept repeating the same soft sentence. "Still here, still here." That was the name of the cafe, But it also felt like a promise, something my parents had been saying to each other for 40 years without words. I realized I'd been running my whole life chasing applause, when maybe the real dream was just to stay, to keep showing up. When I left the next morning, Mom gave me a paper bag with snacks. 3 handwritten notes taped to the outside and 1 inside my shoe. She's thorough. The first note said, "Eat properly." The second said, "Sleep when you're tired, not when the world tells you to." The third was shorter, "Love bravely." I didn't find the fourth one in my shoe until I reached Seoul. It said, "Don't forget to laugh when you burn breakfast." I kept it in my wallet. Back in the city, the noise swallowed me again. Traffic, cameras, schedules, interviews. But the rhythm felt different now. Before, everything was urgency. Now, everything had echo. I caught myself smiling more often, not because things were perfect, but because I could finally hear life breathing between the beats. Even exhaustion sounded musical. During rehearsal, one night, one of the younger staff members asked, "How do you keep your energy so high?" I said, "I recycle it." He blinked. "How?" I grinned. "Through laughter and leftovers." Everyone laughed, but it was true. Laughter has become my renewable resource. It's my mother's legacy, upgraded with sarcasm. Later that week, I visited an orphanage we'd supported quietly for years. The kids were wild, running, singing, shouting my name like it was a spell. One little boy tugged my sleeve and said, "Hyung, do you get scared before you sing?" I thought about it and said, "Always." He frowned. "But you're famous." I knelt down. "Being brave doesn't mean you're never scared. It means you keep singing anyway." He smiled the way my father does, half pride, half mischief. "Then I'll be brave too." He ran off, and I stood there thinking, this is it, the circle keeps spinning. That evening, I sat on the dorm rooftop with the guys. We didn't talk about work for once. We just watched the city breathing beneath us. Someone started playing music from a phone. Someone else started harmonizing. It wasn't planned. It never is. But it felt like the purest performance I'd ever been, part of 6 voices, 1 sky, no cameras. For a moment, I heard my parents' laughter in our harmony. The same honesty, the same peace. I realized then that fame is just a louder version of family. Both need care. Both collapse without trust. Both are built on tiny acts of faith. The difference is that one fades when the world stops watching. The other grows even in silence. My parents chose the second one. I want to too. A few days later, I recorded a solo track called Still Here. It wasn't for release, just for me. The first verse was about running toward dreams. The second was about learning to walk back home. The bridge went, "The crowd forgets, the sea remembers, and laughter keeps the lights on." When I finished the final chorus, the engineer turned around and said quietly, "That one feels like you." I smiled. It should, it's family property. That night, I went live online, nothing planned, just me and a mug of tea. Fans filled the chat with hearts and questions. One asked, "What keeps you motivated lately?" I paused, looked at the camera, and said, "People who don't let me forget to be human. My parents, my brothers, maybe you." Then I added, "And also fried rice. You can't quit when you've tasted perfection." Comments exploded with laughing emojis. Somewhere in the sea of text, someone wrote, "Your laughter makes us feel alive." I typed back, "That's the goal." After I ended the stream, I opened the window. The city was humming its usual midnight song sirens. Wind, neon hum. I whispered into the noise, "Still here." The echo came back, soft and certain. Before sleeping, I wrote one last journal entry. Love is not the fireworks at the start. It's the kitchen light that never goes out. It's the joke that saves the day, the forgiveness that folds shirts, the voice that says, "Eat before speak." If I ever forget who I am, may laughter find me first. I closed the notebook and felt that rare, kind of quiet, the kind that doesn't come from silence, but from gratitude. Somewhere, my father was probably giving unsolicited advice to cafe customers. Somewhere, my mother was humming that same trot song while overwatering her plants. And somewhere inside me, both of them were still teaching me how to live. I turned off the lights and laughed softly to myself for no reason at all. It sounded exactly like home.